All right. So Sam Richardson, Master of Divinity, PhD, has made his mother extremely proud by being a doctor of sociology. Internal medicine would have been better, but sociology is good, and having a master's in divinity both. He has a strong background in working with a number of small Jewish communities across the country and served since 2019 as the director of small community outreach for Jewish National Fund. His ongoing research is near and dear to all of our hearts. He seeks to understand how small Jewish communities engage in the task of transmitting Jewish values forward, facilitating Jewish continuity and strengthening connections to Israel. He has served as a project-oriented team leader in large US-based corporations. He's a university-level researcher, and he has been an educator, a writer, and a renowned speaker. He's also a nice guy. So his overarching goal is to use his skill set to find answers to issues facing American Jewish community. Sam is going to introduce Dov Gordon, who will present first because of his schedule in Israel. So take it away, Sam.
Thank you very much, David, for that warm introduction. Can you all see my screen? Great. I didn't hear any no's, so I'll take that as a yes. Again, do some changes in JNF programming in Israel. Before I take the floor, I'd like to introduce to you my colleague, Dov Gordon. Dov identifies with the Jewish Renewal Movement, has been involved in small Jewish community leadership in upstate New York and central Pennsylvania for the past 6 years. A recent graduate of Penn State University Jewish Studies program. He serves the Jewish people as the Israel Program's Admissions Director for small communities with the Jewish National Fund, as well as the rabbinic intern at Temple Beth Shalom in Williamsport, Pennsylvania. Dov is also pursuing a master's in Jewish professional studies at Gratz College, and in his free time, Dov enjoys concerts, playing guitar, studying Jewish texts, and hanging out with his dog, Gila. Please join me in welcoming Dov to our presentation.
Okay, I'm muted. Okay, now I'm unmuted. Sorry, I'm on my tablet, so it's a little weird. Can you hear me now? Thumbs up? Yofi. So yes, I'm in Israel, so we had to kind of switch things up. But I just want to say hello, and I'm glad to be here and talking to you guys in Asheville. I grew up in my teenage years in Winston-Salem, which is not far from you guys. I remember coming to Asheville for field trips in school to the big house there. So I work for Jewish National Fund, particularly for the Alexander Muss High School in Israel. And to answer David's question in the beginning, the Jewish National Fund USA is not a political organization, and I'll let Sam go into more detail about that when he talks, but that's kind of a good precursor before I get started. So basically what I do is I am interested in sending high school students from 10th grade and up to our high school in Israel program. And it is based in Hod HaSharon, which is just northeast of Tel Aviv, directly east of Herzliya, if you are familiar with Israel and where that is. So I've been here for about 2.5 weeks now. In my first week, I actually was able to go spend on our high school campus. So you guys are meeting me at a good time when I've actually been able to see everything for myself. So this program is really, really amazing. And I joined Jewish National Fund when I saw the ad that they wanted to reach out to small communities. It's the first large Jewish organization that I know about that has that initiative and is specifically looking to send people from small communities to Israel and offer these types of programs. It's something I wish I had access to when I was in high school in my small community, and I'm excited about bringing it to your community and other communities across the country. So what is Alexander Muss High School in Israel? So Alexander Muss High School is an American high school that is located in Israel. We're accredited by the Middle States Accreditation Association. So it's basically like if you were to transfer from Asheville to Winston-Salem for a couple of months and back. So it's not an Israeli school, it's an American school. We have a team that works with each individual student's guidance counselor to make sure that when they do come over, that they are getting exactly the curriculum that they are doing already at their school in America, and that they don't fall behind or miss anything. We can do SATs, PSATs, AP courses, and also offer college credit for a lot of the classes that they take, in addition to the credits that they receive for high school. So the main idea is to come to Israel and live on campus, and to immerse them in Israeli society, and also to teach them about Jewish history and the history of Israel, all the way from the Garden of Eden up through today. And what's really beautiful about this program is when they are learning this history, they do a day in the classroom, and then they actually go on location to where whatever they learned about actually happened, or where we think it happened, and they learn about it right on the site, which is amazing. I think another thing one thing that I feel is extremely important about this school is it's really an opportunity for high school students to have some independence right before they go to college. They're living in a dorm with other kids. They're doing their own laundry. They're responsible to, go get food from the dining hall on their own. So it's really a very independent experience, but in a controlled environment. And also it is immersing these kids in Israeli society. And I think a lot of people believe that Israel is kind of it's a Jewish state, and it's just like America and the Jewish community in America. And that's really not the case. It's Israeli, and it's a whole new and different culture to a lot of people. They'll be eating Israeli food. They'll be in an Israeli town that's out of the touristy area, and, being able to travel around the town and talk to people and meet with people. So it's really, really an immersive experience and a great way to be able to understand Israeli culture and build that connection with Israel. So that's my main job, is to help students go to this program. We offer a ton of financial aid and scholarships. And of course, we work with local organizations in each student's area to help get funding for them if they need it. So it's just a really, really great opportunity. The next thing is Dream Israel. This is a funding opportunity for students. This can be started at any age, but what it does is they raise money for the Jewish National Fund up to $5,000. If they raise $5,000, they'll receive a $7,500 grant to be able to use towards the Alexander Muss program, which is great. It's kind of like almost free money in the form of a grant. We also have an initiative called Plant Your Way. And this is an account where you purchase trees. And we really like to see this account started when kids are really young, even before they enter elementary school. And what you do is you donate to Jewish National Fund through buying trees into this account that's in the student's name. And then the student is able to use 50% of the money that's been placed into the account since the opening for any trip to Israel through Jewish National Fund until they turn 30. So it doesn't have to be Alexander Muss. It can be a college trip or any other of the other trips that we offer. Caravan for Democracy is a college trip for non-Jewish students to come to Israel and learn about the democratic values of the state, to see what it is like in person. I'm sure many of you know college campuses in America, some have some very strong anti-Israel and anti-Zionist groups on campus. And while we all have, our opinions about what the government does, these are groups that say Jews shouldn't exist in Israel and the state of Israel shouldn't exist, period. And that's, not something that we want to be perpetuated through these campuses. So this really takes people and shows them and brings them here and just shows them the country, shows them what it's like, shows them the conflict. They go to the border of the Gaza Strip, they go up to the West Bank, and they really get a firsthand look at what Israel's like, what life is like through the eyes of a Jew in Israel, but also what life is like through the eyes of an Arab Israeli in Israel, and for those people that are living in the Gaza or in the West Bank. And it's a really, really, really good program. So much great feedback from people when they come, and just not knowing, seeing everything you hear on TV and on campus, and then realizing that, oh, it's really not that way. Faculty Fellowship is a program for educators, and it does takes educators to our Jewish National Fund sites around Israel, which Sam will tell you about. And then we have one more thing, the trip I'm on now, which is called Alternative Break. And this is a trip for Jewish college students. It's a volunteer trip. They give up they raise some money for Jewish National Fund, $900 while they're in school. They give up their winter break. They come to Israel. They spend a lot of time volunteering in low-income communities and environmental places that are working on beautifying the nature preserves, on helping. The other day we were in a artist center that helps youth who don't have access to art education and dance programming. They get the programming there. We went and kind of renovated their space. Just really, really beautiful volunteering opportunities, as well as Israel education and just some fun tourist stuff. We did a tour of the city of Akko today. We were up on the border with Lebanon in the grottos next to the sea, and it was beautiful. And the kids really get a lot out of it. I'm staffing one bus of kids, and every day we kind of have a reflection, and it really always amazes me, because the one thing that really meant the most to them throughout every day has always been our volunteer work, and not the fun things that we're going to do or the amazing sites that we're going to see. It's always been, helping people was so meaningful to me. So that this really makes an impact on those students. I'm excited to be working with you guys. Unfortunately, I'm unable to stay on the call as I am staffing this trip and need to go prepare for Shabbat with the kids. So I will let you go, but I will be in contact with you guys in the very near future, and hopefully we'll be down to visit you all and be able to answer any questions. Sam will give you my contact information. If you do have students that you think are interested in the High School in Israel program now, please send me their names, their information, and I will be happy to contact them and their parents and set up meetings with them to go into further detail. Shabbat Shalom, and have a wonderful day. It was wonderful meeting all of you.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Dov. And now going into a little more depth about the Jewish National Fund and why I'm here. As Dov said, Jewish National Fund is the only major Jewish organization that specifically reaches out to small Jewish communities. And my personal passion is for small Jewish communities. As a matter of fact, I wrote a dissertation and I've written several articles about the magic and utility of thinking small and of understanding how small Jewish communities have been a vital part of the American Jewish scene for 200 years. And we started late. I'm going to try to go into more summary than details, but certainly have a Q&A portion at the end. So please feel free to ask any questions. And hold your questions until the end, but I want to make sure that I cover at least all bases. So just as JNF is more than trees, and we're going to get to that, JNF is more than cities. We provide a voice for lay leaders, our many partners and donors, staff who live and work beyond our large Jewish communities in the metropolitan areas. And as you know, although the phrase American Jewish community usually brings to mind Manhattan, the Bronx, what have you, there are hundreds of thousands of Jewish Americans who live in places like Hattiesburg, Mississippi, Grand Junction, Colorado, where I grew up, Eugene, Oregon, and Asheville, North Carolina. In fact, there's over 200 Jewish communities in the United States with fewer than 5,000 members, and most of them have been around for 135 years or more. The latest numbers I could find on Asheville is from 2011 at about 2,500 full-time residents, and then about another 500 part-time residents going to various places at different times of the year. And as you know, also, those of us who live in small Jewish communities do Judaism a bit differently than do our urban dwelling brothers and sisters. But our passion for Israel is just as deep, and we are proud to add our voice. But it's important for us to understand the key concepts of thinking small, which is not small thinking. It's the ability to take what we have, as some people view less, and turn it into more. And I came up with 4 findings in my research that demonstrate how small Jewish communities are successful. Number 1, we don't rely on large institutions or the professional class. We may be fortunate to have them, but it's not the core of our being. We don't outsource, or we drastically reduce outsourcing by increasing parental and personal responsibility. David able to step in at a moment's notice and into the professional spot because we had the need. Large communities can't always do that and turn on a dime like we can in small communities. We are able to clarify and articulate our community values, unique as they are, apart from those who live in the big cities and urban areas. And finally, we are not afraid to set and clarify our boundaries, which encourage living by community values. And my research indicates that regardless of the community you're in, when these principles are adhered to as a community, it increases Jewish identity at the individual and the community level. There's a higher affinity with Israel. Children are more likely to return to their roots in their late 20s than are their peers in communities which do not employ these principles. And something that many people do not realize, that as large as JNF is, one of the secrets to our success is thinking small, meeting the needs of individuals, families, and communities. But going back to our catchline, JNF is more than trees. We actually have a number of focus areas. Of course, forestry and green innovations. And as Dov mentioned, education and advocacy. Also, research and development in water, in food, in science of many different diverse categories. Community building, literally from the ground up, building homes, schools, synagogues, medical centers, creating small Jewish communities in Israel. Heritage site preservation, disabilities and special needs for people of all ages, and of course, water solutions. And here's one of my favorite videos illustrating the vision that JNF has undertaken and is fulfilling.
It all begins with a vision. Creating a bright and prosperous future for the land and people of Israel is Jewish National Fund's vision. The vision we build upon every day. To create change, you need a vision. A vision of lush and breathtaking forests where once was only rocky and brown land. A vision of transforming the Negev and the Galilee, areas filled with pioneering spirit and determination, but faced with economic challenges. We're helping these areas reach their potential by creating jobs, housing, tourism, and quality of life opportunities, injecting a vitality that is transforming them into places people want to live. A vision for us to speak our values, leaving no one behind. A vision of quenching the thirst of Israel's population and allowing the agricultural economy to thrive by bolstering Israel's water security with reservoirs, drip irrigation, and river rehabilitation. A vision that took Israel to recycling 85% of its water today. A vision that searches for solutions that will make a better tomorrow. From state-of-the-art greenhouses to flourishing pepper and flower farms to high-tech labs that are working on medical breakthroughs. a vision of a continuum that engages at every age, from the time you're born through adulthood and beyond, ensuring that we are raising tomorrow's leaders today. A vision that understands that a nation must know its past to create a stronger future, that the stories of our history are preserved to be retold for generations to come. Since 1901, Jewish National Fund has been guided by a vision of a bright, beautiful future for the land and people of Israel. A vision that Jewish National Fund delivers on year after year. Be a part of our vision. Join us.
I never tire of seeing pictures of home and thinking of how far we have come as a people in our land for almost 75 years, but beyond the 75 years, it goes beyond that. We've got a challenge coming up. It's here. We've got to meet it because 75% of Israelis live in 25% of the land. Haifa, Tel Aviv, Jerusalem. Currently, the cost of living is so crazy high that an unrenovated 4-bedroom apartment can sell for as much as 4 million shekels. That's $1.25 million. Did I say 4-bedroom? No, it's 4 rooms. 4 rooms, single bath, kitchen, couple bedrooms, living room, 4 million shekels. Last year, Tel Aviv was declared the most expensive city in the world, according to the Economic Intelligence Unit's Worldwide Cost of Living Index. A friend of mine in Beersheba sent me a video last week of a home in her neighborhood. It is run down, looks horrible, is for sale for 1.5 million shekels, a little more than $500,000. It's crazy. So back in 2008-9, after a intensive study on infrastructure and population was done by the government, the Israeli government set a goal of moving 600,000 people to the north and 1 million people to the south. And so in 2010, the Jewish National Fund committed to moving 1/2 of the government's numbers. And so our Go North plan is looking to move 300,000 residents from the core to the north, to the Hula Valley, to the Upper Galilee, and 500,000 residents to the Negev and the Arava. How are we going to do that? Because we're not getting government funding to do this. We're just not implementing a government plan. We have to make the plans, strategy, build the community, get the funds in order to provide for the people who are moving, and then move the people. That's our task. And we're doing it through our 7 domains of work, making sure that everybody's needs are met so that they can move from that very expensive high-rise building in Jerusalem or Tel Aviv to a nice single-family 3-bedroom home, 2-bath, full-size kitchen, park, driveway and next to their home, front yard, backyard, room for kids to play. They're beautiful things. We currently have 1,597 lots available, and they are all over the country, as you can see. The way this works is that our housing fund raises the money, builds the homes. We work with the municipalities and the regional councils to make sure that we're connected to roads, to sewer, to water, to internet backbone. And we build the rest, the homes, the schools. We bring in vendors to grocery stores, everything that you would need to live in a community. We build a school, we build a synagogue. But how is a family, a young family with 2 or 3 kids, going to be able to move into one of these homes? Because, well, they're not part of the state subsidy system. They're not part of the regular banking system. But instead of $1.5 million shekels or $500,000, it's going to cost you $345,000 instead of over $500,000 for an apartment. $345,000 for this wonderful 3-bedroom standalone home. And we are going to finance it for you. We're going to gift money to the municipality, to the regional council, and they are going to set their own criteria, which is less than the banking system for creditworthiness, job. I mean, they're still going to bring qualified people, but they're not going to require the 30% down payment. They're going to require a 8% down payment. And then they're going to give them a very good interest rate so that they can pay these loans back quicker, so that the money goes back into that fund, which has been gifted by Jewish National Fund. And then other people can use that money to move into the area. So it's a great way to grow a community. I was there. I was in the Gaza envelope this past May, and I saw some of these new homes. I toured a model home. I met one of the families. It's just a wonderful, you feel as though you're doing something that's at the grassroots. It's a chalutza, a pioneering experience. And speaking of our pioneers, come back with me a few thousand years to that beginning idea, the idea of Zion, of Zion. And it's here today. It's something that started at least 1800 years ago. But then, as we move through history, we wanted to be a nation free in our land. Liot am choshi be'artzeinu. A free people in our land. And it started 1800 BC, right? Hashem calls out to Avram, Lech lecha, get forth from your native land. Go to the place I will show you. I will assign this land to your offspring. So 4,000 years ago, this dream of Zion began. And when Abraham came to Beersheba, he planted a tamarisk tree, and he set out to be a man after God's own heart in that way. And of course, our history, as we go through the Torah and the Tanakh, and from the post-temple periods, is rich and full and Israel-centric. And of course, this past Sunday, we observed the mourning of the loss of both of our temples and the first and the second diaspora. And we are part of that second diaspora still. Yet, our home is Eretz Yisrael. It's a very difficult thing to feel. I know that you're probably all shaking your heads, even though I can't see it, to understand exactly what this feeling is. Throughout world history, the Jewish people have been dealing with powers who come into our land and leave our land and come and bring our state close to existence and then not. And then we come in, and finally, 1948, we established the third Jewish state. I won't go through this detail, but if you'd like, I can be happy to give you the dates and some text to read if you want some in-depth information on our history and how all of these things work together towards building the Jewish state. But the modern history begins in 1895 with the Dreyfus Affair in France. A French army captain was falsely convicted of passing military secrets to the Germans. And Theodor Herzl, who at the time was a young reporter for the New Free Press in Vienna, he, as a secular Jewish person, could not believe the anti-Semitism that he was witnessing before his eyes and among the people of France. And so he set out in his own mind a pathway to bring about a Jewish state where Jews around the world could come and live and be free of anti-Semitism. And so in 1896, he published The Jewish State. I encourage you to get a copy, read it. It's mind-blowing in some ways and confusing in other ways, but it's an important tome to have in your portfolio. Then he brought together a Congress of people, the first Zionist Congress in 1897. He raised the money, even providing appropriate clothing for the delegates. And they came together, and his opening words were, "We are here to lay the foundation stone of the house which is to shelter the Jewish nation." Those were the opening words. So then, when he stepped down from the podium, after saying, we need dedicated capital to purchase land in the state of Israel that will be owned by the Jewish people, he stepped down. There were people speaking for and against the proposal. And this is at the Fifth Zionist Congress, in 1901, Fifth Zionist Congress. Then at 7:40 p.m. on Sunday, December 29th, the vote was taken and Herzl proclaimed the Jewish National Fund has been created. And a delegate from Poland said, Zvi Herman Shapira said that once the idea of a national fund were realized, he would be able to die in peace. I say the opposite. Once an abiding kayemet, national fund, keren, is realized, I will be able to live in peace. Now, as we saw last week, peace is not permanent. However, my colleagues and friends who live in the Negev, in the Gaza envelope, and even we saw the rockets get as far as the northern beaches of Tel Aviv. Even in the more difficult areas, it's only 1% hell, 99% heaven. We have been granted a certain measure of peace. We're looking to increase that to 100%. And so we started by collecting money, buying land that is owned by all of us together. And so by the time we come to 1947, 700,000 acres of land was purchased and owned by the Jewish National Fund, 14% of the land in Israel. And we purchased the land and then we planted trees. And when I first started working for JNF, I was able to say, I've got a question, never been answered. What's the answer? Why trees? Maybe you've asked that yourself. Well, the answer goes back to, it's the Ottomans. Or the Ottomans were in charge of the land of Israel. They were the governing body in the early 20th century. And according to Ottoman law, when you were the new owner of land, you had 5 years in which to cultivate the land. If you did not cultivate the land, then squatters could come and you couldn't kick them out. The state could appropriate your land and you could do nothing. The person you purchased the land from could come and reacquire it with no charge. So you have to cultivate the land. What's the easiest way to cultivate the land? Plant trees. So it was an ecological, not an ecological intention. It was a ecological decision of convenience that resulted in the tens of thousands of dunams of trees that we now have in Israel. And as you know, proportionally, Israel is one of the most densely forested nations in the world. Take a look at the map from 1940. You can see in the blue is all the land that was purchased by the Jewish National Fund, going from north to south, from the area around Mount Hermon down into the Gaza envelope, to what we call the Gaza envelope today, and in the center of the Negev desert. And then in 1947, the UN partition plan, it actually closely follows those land acquisitions. So you can see directly that the Jewish National Fund, as well as people who bought privately land in the land of Israel, that this is what was followed for the partition plan, which of course was rejected, and then we didn't have peace the next day, but it was our start. May 14, 1948, wish I was there. I can just hear Ben-Gurion reading from the Declaration. This right is the natural right of the Jewish people to be masters of their own fate, like all other nations, in their own sovereign state. Accordingly, we, members of the People's Council, representatives of the Jewish community of Eretz Israel and of the Zionist movement, are here assembled on the day of the termination of the British mandate over Eretz Israel, and by virtue of our national and historic right, and on the strength of the resolution of the United Nations General Assembly, hereby declare the establishment of a Jewish state in Eretz Israel to be known as the State of Israel. And we danced in the streets. And then we got at our guns because we needed to defend our land and keep our land. And so we come forth today And the Jewish National Fund continues to build and secure our land for our people using our 7 comprehensive action areas. I'd like to focus briefly on just a couple. First being disabilities and special needs. 13% of Israel's citizens are considered physically or mentally challenged. Thus, this is an opportunity to live our values. We believe passionately that the inclusion of people with disabilities and special needs should be woven tightly into the fabric of Jewish life, and all the more so in Israel. And so we are actively supporting Special in Uniform. As you probably know, every 16-year-old gets a letter from the Israeli government. Prepare yourself. You will be inducted into the Israeli Defense Forces to defend your land. However, that young person who has a physical disability gets a letter that says, we're sorry, we can't use you. And that forever is a black mark, personally, professionally. And so Special Uniform works with people who have special needs, give them training in what they can do, what their abilities are, whether it's packing parachutes, cleaning a mess hall, cooking, going through inventory of any number of things, whatever that might be, working with canine units or reading maps and satellite feeds. So that, and actually, so these guys are saving lives, and they're helping the IDF fight more effectively. So they go into the reserves, and then many of them actually go into active duty. And we graduated our first Special in Uniform officer last summer. That was a great accomplishment. Ari Negev, Nachalat Iran, a place for children and adults of a variety of intense physical and mental disabilities. It's not only a place to receive treatment and therapy, but we're actually building a community at the nearby kibbutz. We're building up 5,000 housing units so that parents can live near their children, so that, God forbid an accident, a family can live near their parent who is now being treated at Adi Negev. So we're building up this whole community around this space. Also, Red Mountain Therapeutic Riding Center. It's a place where a horse can give freedom and strength and mobility to someone who otherwise is bound to a wheelchair or has to use a walker or crutches to get around. It's amazing to see the look of a young child or a 50-year-old adult. They get out of their wheelchair, they're lifted up onto the horse, they take the reins, and they can do whatever they want. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing. I'd also like to look at community building. Makom Pioneers. Now, Makom means place. And the Makom Community Pioneers are young, creative, idealistic people from all sectors of Israeli society, working, living, leading socially innovative initiatives throughout Israel. So Makom members create places where living is not merely surviving, but thriving. Makom designs educational programs, training, materials that help make sense of how we can best be a free people in our land. They explore freedom, peoplehood, security. Their goal is to open up explorations into the possibilities that modern Jewish life affords. And they do this for all the groups of people in Israel, not just the Ashkenaz, Sephardim, Mizrahim, mountain Jews, Russian communities, Bedouin, the Druze are all served by Makom pioneers. They call them social startups, enhancing Israeli society. And they are focusing themselves today on the areas of the north, the areas of the south, where we're moving people out of the core, also with Ukrainian new Olim who are coming to our land without a job, without clothes, with nothing. And they're providing them families to live with, not just putting them in an absorption center, but a family to live with, providing them food, providing them clothing, providing them personal necessities, providing them job placement, job training if necessary. This is Macomb, as well as a couple of other agencies the Jewish National Fund works closely with to build community. One of my favorite places in Israel is Chalutza, in the Gaza envelope. The area of Chalutza was a barren desert in 2005. Families were evacuated from Gush Katif, Jewish communities in Gaza during our disengagement. And some of them said, okay, we'll go live in Beersheba, we'll go live in the north in Carmiel. But others said, no, this is our home. The southern Negev is our home. We want to stay here. And so they moved and built communities in Nave, in Bnei Netzarim, in Shlomit. And here is my colleague Yedidia Harush to give you a fun summary of their story.
Hello, welcome to Chalutza. I'm so excited to host you here in this very special, unique corner where Egypt and Gaza meet, all the way down the western Negev, northern western Negev. Chalutza is a big desert that no one ever wanted to come and build and develop. But a group of people who were evacuated from their homes in Gush Katif and the Gaza Strip decided to take upon themselves this mission of building the state of Israel and were sent here by the government. Look at it. All sand. No one ever thought that anything can grow here. This was a place of death, a cursed land, like our neighbors used to call this place. I was born and raised in the Gaza Strip. I came here as a kid when everybody else said to us, this is the place, don't go there. Join me to see what we did here. Hey, we're back to 2020. I know it's hard to believe what we managed to do in such short time. Look at it. Look at this beautiful produce. Just picked it just now. And this grows here in the cursed land, in the place that nothing can grow in. Over 80 species of fruits and vegetables, 2,000 people, schools, medical centers, community centers, synagogues, daycare centers, kindergartens, chickens for eggs and cows for milk, and so much more. It's all thanks to the Jewish National Fund, who partnered with us and believed in us, and still believe in us. And together, we're completing this vision of building the Negev, of bringing 15,000 people to this area, of helping to fulfill the Blueprint Negev initiative the Jewish National Fund invented back in the early 2000s. And together we will grow into 15,000 people. Because for us, even the sky is not the limit. Even when we get rockets from Egypt, rockets from Gaza, ISIS, Hamas, sandstorms, wind, distance, whatnot, we will overcome everything. Because together we can. Together we can believe, and together we can achieve. Am Yisrael Chai. Thank you.
Am Yisrael Chai. Yes, I was there in May. I ate watermelon that was grown in the sand. It's an amazing, amazing place. I saw the 250 dairy cows that they now have in Chalutza. So community building, special needs. We need you. We need you to join us in this holy work. You can get updates regularly on Facebook, Small Communities, or on Twitter, JNF-SCC, Small Communities. And of course, I, Dove, am available to you Jerry has our contact information, as does David, and we are happy to help you in any way strengthen and make new connections with Israel and to realize your dreams for our land. Any questions? Yes, Melody, you're on mute.
Unmute. What about job opportunities in the new towns?
That's a very good question. Yes. In the towns that we're building where people are moving from Tel Aviv, Yerushalayim, Haifa, it's 2022, and so often they're able to bring their job with them, at least part-time, and work remotely. One of the things that the state has done to make this much easier is we now have the trains that are going from Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, Haifa, down to Beersheba and down parts south. I rode that train. It's fabulously easy to get on off. It's fast. And so you can live south of Beersheba, but then be at work in Tel Aviv in less than an hour. And you don't have to pay for parking. And you don't have to fight the crazy Tel Aviv traffic. So that's part of it. The other part, we are partners with the Louder Employment Center in Beersheba, which is working with the entire Negev. There's also a branch up in Akko that is working to help people without a university. In Israel, they have an interesting two-tier college system. There's university and there's college. Not dissimilar to our college versus community college. But so folks with a college BA, but not a university BA, have a harder time getting a job. We are working to give them internships because actually in Israel, and I'm very passionate about this as well, experience is determined to be more important than the piece of paper, which is why service in the IDF is so important, so that you have experience working with your peers in problem solving and survival tasks. So these college students, though, they don't have that piece of paper that says university. So we're going to give them more experience in an internship. We're actually paying for half of their salary. So to entice companies, mostly startups, small businesses, but also some larger ones, to hire these kids right out of college, give them a year, 18 months experience so that they can then go and get a better job, which will keep them in the Negev desert. Because oftentimes they didn't go to college because they couldn't afford to live in the city. So they stayed living at home, went to college, and now they have a reason to stay because they can now get a job in their own hometown. Up in the north, we're doing the same, and we're also doing it with Bedouin women. There's been a huge change in Bedouin culture over the past just 15, 25 years. And it's as with Orthodox, ultra-Orthodox Jews, in the Bedouin community, it's mostly the women who are going to school, getting a job, and supporting their family. Well, they're facing challenges with availability. And so we are creating new programs for them to learn tech, to learn nursing, to learn a variety of skills so that they can go out and market their skills. We're also encouraging artisans. Israel, as a startup nation, is not just with high tech, it's also with handcrafts, whether that's sewing and knitting, woodworking, stone crafting, flowers, jewels, all kinds of things. We've set up shared workspace. So people, if they want to brainstorm with other people who are also artisans, they need access to high-speed internet that they may not have at their home. They want to have a central place for shipping. Costs are crazy in the Negev and up north in the Hula Valley. And so we have central locations to ship multiple raw goods to a variety of artisans at one time. So we're helping facilitate that. We started a small business association down in the Negev. We're up to 150 companies. We're very proud of all that work that we're doing. Did that answer your question, Melody?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. Yes, Jane.
What was the impact of COVID on any and all of the programs? Understandably, it must have been extremely significant. And
We as JNF and our affiliates, which is separate from the impact that COVID had on Israel as a whole, we were very blessed because JNF as a lay-led organization tends to be a little more forward-thinking than other organizations who don't have such a strong input by our lay leaders. Going back to 2001 and the economic impact that the 9/11 incident had on the United States and on Israel because of the heightened tensions and then the war, the board of directors for Jewish National Fund said, we need to have a rainy day fund so that when something like this happens again, we can cover all of our expenses, all administrative, all program expenses for at least a year. They built that fund up so that by the time 2019 came around, $345 million were in that rainy day fund. So then 2020 comes, the lockdowns happen, people have to stay at home, people can't send their kids to school, their kids don't necessarily have the technology they need. We have students at Alexander Muss High School who are stuck. We have people who at Red Mountain Writing Center, we had Adi Negev, who literally can't get home, but even if they're able to get home and back to work, there's no patients, so they're not getting a salary. We were able to cover all expenses for everything. As a matter of fact, what we didn't know, you may know there's the 5th election in 5 years coming up in Israel on November 1st. Well, at the time there had been 3 elections. And what we did not know, because people were embarrassed, understandably, to say, the bureaucracy, which is unparalleled in Israel, had not written checks for nonprofit grants that had already been granted, which many of our affiliates, JNF may be funding them 40, 60, 80%, but they still have a proportion of their budget comes from a government grant. Those hadn't been written in years. I said, okay, we're using the rainy day fund anyway, let's make up those grants. And so we made up those grants. So all of our affiliates came up to 100% operating budget. All of the salaries were met. Plus we bought laptops, we bought food, we bought medicine. We employed our high school students in Green Horizons to get on their bikes and deliver groceries and medicines to elderly and shut-ins. Macomb communities literally moved families from one part of the country to another to kibbutzim, where the majority of residents are senior citizens who needed somebody to check in on them and care for them. So they moved 3-4 families at a time to these kibbutzim to check on them and make sure they were cared for. It was a really miraculous and joyful experience. And then, as you may know, JNF in the United States, we actually have had 2 record-setting years in a row, which I account to our good financial stewardship by our lay leaders and the quality programming that we're doing in Israel. And just so you know, and financially, the board set a maximum of 19% overhead fundraising costs. 81% of all funds raised must go to Israel. And when you donate and designate a specific project, 100% of those funds will go to the project in Israel with no administrative fee. So my salary only comes from undesignated funds, and all overhead. Well, in the past 2 years, we were under 12% actually for overhead expenses versus the monies that went out to Israel. So we're quite proud of that. Thank you for asking, Jane. Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good.
Very impressive.
Thank you. And then I'm sorry, it says JCC 123. I don't know your name. You're on mute.
Yeah. You talking about me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I think you answered part of it, but who, how, why are the funds divvied up?
That's a good question.
Okay.
Sure. And, part of it is whether or not an organization is actually a part of Jewish National Fund. So, for example, the Alexander Muss High School in Israel was actually acquired by JNF back in 2007. And so, though we charge tuition, we also are literally responsible for that as an organization. So they have funding locked in at a higher rate than others might, simply because of that relationship. The Louder Employment Center, we are joint administrator. I don't want to say, I don't use the word owner because they are their own organization, but they're part of another organization called Eretz Ir, which is a nonprofit consortium. And Ron Louder gives the money through both, half through JNF, half through Eretz Ir. And so their budget is comprised of only from those two organizations. And they are very well funded by both. Now, other organizations, said again, the Red Mountain Therapeutic Writing Center. We provide them, when I looked, I think we're providing them about $250,000 guaranteed from our books based on what their budget is and what they've asked for and their programming. So there's a formula that our accounting office used to determine how much we're going to guarantee them. Now, as designated donations come in, certainly they may get more than that because we guarantee that all designated donations go to them. So at the end of the year, it might end up $300,000, $400,000. A organization like Green Horizons, which gets a fairly substantial chunk from the state, because it's been around for 40 years. And it's another rite of passage kind of organization where kids learn how to live outside the house, sleeping in tents, what food, where you get water, where you get food. They have, and so their proportion of their budget is much smaller from the Jewish National Fund. So it's complex and is organization dependent. Did I answer your question? Okay, good. What else can I answer for you? Amy or Ashley? Sharon took a break. David?
Yeah, I think I want to just thank you, Sam, for an amazing presentation, and for Dove as well. What I would say is that if anyone has further questions, definitely you can direct them to Jerry at the JCC, to Ashley if it's something that we need to direct to Sam or Dove. We'll certainly make sure it's done. I just want to thank everyone for sticking in. We actually, Sam just put his and Dove's email addresses in the chat. So again, any further questions, by all means, don't hesitate to either contact the JCC or to contact Sam or Dove. And Ashley's back, which is wonderful. Thank you all, and Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody. That was terrific. Thank you.
Shabbat Shalom.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Shabbat Shalom.